There are moments in life that seem small at first, almost insignificant, but have the power to change everything. I used to think I had it all: an amazing wife, a love I believed would last forever, and a peaceful life that anyone would envy. But just when everything felt perfect, the first grains of challenge quietly started to fall, bringing emotions I had never faced before. And the hardest part wasn't losing love, it was watching the person you love go through pain you can't stop. This is my story about love, trust, betrayal, and the complexities of family. I met her when we were both in our late 20s. From the very first moment, her radiant smile and curious eyes made me want to explore every corner of her soul. Our dating life was simple but warm. Weekend walks, cuddling up for movies in our small sunlit apartment, and cooking together. Those evenings, flour and sauce would cover the kitchen table, but we would laugh so much that we forgot the exhaustion of the day. I remember one time she clumsily spilled flour all over the floor. I picked it up and said, "You may be spilling flour everywhere, but I've already let my heart fall completely for you." She blushed and giggled, and I knew then that our love wasn't just words, it was lived in small, honest moments. Our love wasn't about looks or superficial attraction. I loved everything about her: the way she furrowed her brow when thinking, the tiny squint when she concentrated on something, the shy smile when complimented. Once she whispered, "Do you still love me, even as I change?" I held her hand, looked into her eyes, and said, "I love you not because of how you look, but because you are you. No matter how you change, I will always love you." Those words weren't just a promise, they were the full measure of my trust in her. 2 years later, we married in a small, cozy ceremony surrounded by family and a few close friends. Not long after, she became pregnant. Happiness overwhelmed us. I imagined afternoons teaching our child their first steps, quiet nights reading bedtime stories, and the simple joy of watching love grow in human form. I thought this was the moment every man dreams of, seeing the happiness of the one you love reflected in a child. But time doesn't just bring joy. Her body changed with each month of pregnancy. I watched her softness, her graceful movements, as she created a new life. I still complimented her, hugged her, stroked her hair before work or before bed. But deep down, I noticed a creeping anxiety, concerns about herself, how she saw herself. She started lingering in front of the mirror, eyes hinting at worry. When I asked, "Do you still love me?" she gave a small, sad smile and said, "You won't leave me, right?" My chest tightened. I held her gently, saying, "I love you, always. Nothing will change that." The days that followed were peaceful, but tinged with an unspoken tension. Every time I looked at her, I realized our happiness didn't just come from love or simply being together. It came from navigating those unspoken fears and insecurities side by side. She often asked me to choose her outfit, to help pick her dress before going out. Each time, I saw that worry flash in her eyes. "Do you still think I'm beautiful?" I smiled and said, "You're always beautiful, not because of your figure, but because you're you, still." I wondered if my words were enough to ease the doubts in her mind. One evening, after the baby was asleep, we sat on the sofa, hands tightly clasped. Under the soft glow of the living room lamp, she whispered, "I'm afraid I won't be attractive to you anymore." I stroked her hair and said, "I don't love you because of looks. I love you because you are you. No matter what changes, I'll always be here." She leaned on my shoulder and sighed, and I felt a subtle distance between her and herself. And between her and the world, time passed, and we prepared for our first child. Everything seemed perfect, but I saw the gaps in her eyes. These were the first signs of challenges of confidence, of trust, and of the love I had thought was unshakable. I knew the test was coming, quiet, inevitable, and looming. In the final weeks of her pregnancy, I watched her more closely. Every step, every gesture, wanted to remember it all. I knew that soon our lives would change. Completely, a child would arrive, bringing with them worries, responsibilities, and insecurities we had never faced. Every night I held her close, whispering, "We'll get through this together. I promise." She leaned into me, and in that moment, I felt complete happiness, though I knew that unknown challenges still lay ahead. The first few weeks after our baby was born were both joyful and exhausting. I still remember the moment I first saw our child, tiny little human with wide, innocent eyes, lying in her mother's arms. I smiled, my heart overflowing with happiness. But at the same time, I noticed the inevitable changes in our lives, in the woman I loved. She had changed a lot since the pregnancy. Not just her body, but the way she carried herself, her voice, her gaze. Where once she had been confident and radiant, now her eyes sometimes avoided mirrors, and her glance carried a hint of fear. She became more sensitive to every comment, no matter how small. I still told her she was beautiful, still hugged her, stroked her hair, reminded her that she was still stunning to me. But somehow, those words felt like a temporary bandage. They couldn't erase the quiet fear brewing inside her. One evening, after the baby was asleep, I watched her sitting in front of the mirror. The soft yellow light hit her tired but still beautiful face. She gently touched her belly and whispered, "What do you see? Do you think I'm ugly now?" I walked over, took her hand, and looked her in the eyes. "I still think you're amazing. You're you, and I love every part of you." She gave a weak smile, but I could feel the inner turmoil, the insecurity that wasn't going away. Even though my love remained steadfast, the changes in her body affected her everyday life. She no longer felt confident wearing clothes she used to love. Parties and social gatherings became sources of anxiety. She often declined invitations, avoided going out, and sometimes even refused to take pictures with our baby for fear of how her body might look. My heart ached. I wanted to tell her again and again that she was beautiful and precious, but my words often felt small against the storm of self-doubt inside her. One day, while we were walking in the park with our baby, I overheard her whisper to herself, "I'm so ugly. How can he still love me?" My chest tightened. I stepped closer, placing my hand on her shoulder. "I love you because you're you. Nothing can change that." She turned away silently. I knew my words, sincere as they were, weren't enough to heal the wounds she had created for herself. Over time, her insecurity began to affect her behavior. Her eating became inconsistent, sometimes too much, sometimes too little, as though she had already decided she was unattractive. When she looked in the mirror, she would inspect herself, sigh, and quietly turn away. I wanted to hold her, tell her she was still beautiful, but in her eyes, I could see a distance I'd never experienced before. During this period, small arguments started to appear, not because love had faded, but because stress had accumulated from the pressure she put on herself. Once, I suggested going out for the weekend, and she refused. I don't want anyone to see me right now." I tried to reassure her, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I just want to be with you." But she shook her head, tears in her eyes. I realized that love, no matter how genuine, sometimes isn't enough to erase the fear and shame someone carries inside. Her insecurity also affected how she perceived herself in our relationship. She often asked me in a quiet, hesitant voice, "Do you still find me attractive?" I would answer firmly, "I do, because you're you," but her gaze would drift away, searching for some external reassurance, something I had never imagined would happen in our marriage. I began to feel a subtle, but undeniable distance between her and me, between love and fear, between the present and an uncertain future. Late at night, after the baby was asleep, I would sit beside her on the sofa. She leaned on my shoulder, eyes distant. "Do you really love me, even though I've changed like this?" I stroked her hair and whispered, "I love you. Nothing can change that. I'm here, always here," she nodded, but I knew the doubts were still there. I wondered if I was doing enough, or if I was merely witnessing her struggle with herself while feeling powerless. The early weeks after childbirth were a series of tense, anxious days. I tried to keep things normal, care for the baby, care for her, but deep down I realized that love alone wasn't enough. It required empathy, patience, and constant reminders of her worth. I started to notice the small signs, a soft smile, a fleeting sadness in her eyes, moments when she reached out or withdrew. These changes weren't just physical, they affected her mindset and our relationship deeply. I realized that the greatest challenge wasn't just welcoming a new life, it was watching the person I loved struggle with herself, even while my love remained unconditional. Every night, holding her close, I silently told myself, "Be patient, be there for her, show her that love endures." Yet, sometimes I wondered, would our love be strong enough to overcome the insecurities and doubts that quietly crept into our marriage? She became sensitive to every remark, even from friends or colleagues. Every scrutinizing glance or casual comment seemed to unmoor her. And then, one day, I noticed something I never wanted to see. She started seeking validation from someone outside our marriage. I discovered it by accident, through messages on her phone. At first, I didn't want to believe it, telling myself I might be misunderstanding. But her eyes and body language began to change. The secrecy, the long silences without reason all pointed to the truth. One evening, after she had just showered, I saw her trembling with her phone. I stood outside the door, heart heavy. I heard her whisper to someone I had never met, "He doesn't need to love me. He just wants to look at me, see me." My chest felt like it was being crushed. When I confronted her directly, her eyes flickered with fear before she admitted softly, I just want to feel attractive, to know there's someone out there, noticing me without needing love." I stood there silently, as if each string of my heart was being pulled tight. I loved her unconditionally, but now I realized the person I loved was seeking affirmation from someone who didn't love her, wasn't committed, and bore no responsibility. The mix of disappointment and pain collided with the love I still felt. I loved her, loved who she was, but trust had been broken. The promises, the nights we held each other, the pledges to get through everything together, they suddenly felt fragile. I wondered, could love alone save someone who was hurting herself? We began to face each other more, but not in a positive way. Every conversation felt like a struggle. I wanted her to admit wrongdoing, She wanted me to understand her insecurities, One evening, after the baby was asleep, I sat beside her. "Why did you do this? Do you know how much I love you?" She looked down, tears in her eyes. I don't know. I just wanted to feel attractive. You still love me, but I'm afraid I'm ugly, afraid you don't want to be with me anymore. I held her, yet my heart ached. I loved her, but I also knew a relationship couldn't survive on love alone if trust was shattered. I started considering difficult decisions. Should I continue or set boundaries to protect myself and our child? In the following days, the distance between us became clear, not from a lack of love, but from pain and wounds that couldn't yet heal. She became secretive, avoided my gaze for hours, even avoided intimate conversations. I felt a tangible change. The woman I once trusted completely was now lost in a world I couldn't reach. We tried to maintain daily life for our baby, but deep down, I knew the fracture was real. It wasn't a violent argument. It was a quiet emptiness, something we both sensed, but were afraid to fully confront. One night, lying beside her, holding hands, staring at the ceiling, will we ever get back to the way we were? She just closed her eyes and sighed, as if no answer existed. I sensed the internal struggle raging inside her between insecurity, fear, and her love for me. But I also realized that if this continued, trust could never be restored. Her infidelity didn't just hurt MIT, made me question myself. Had I done something wrong? Was I too busy to notice she needed more attention? I blamed myself at first, then realized that her insecurity wasn't entirely my doing. It came from her, from self-doubt built up over time. I knew the thought of divorce was becoming clearer in my mind, not because I had stopped loving her, but because trust had been broken. I couldn't continue in a relationship where someone sought validation elsewhere, while I still loved unconditionally. This decision didn't come easily. It came with pain, a sense of failure, and helplessness watching someone I loved suffer. In the following days, I began preparing myself for the next steps. I still cared, still looked after her, but I also had to protect myself. I didn't want our relationship to become a battleground. I wanted it to end peacefully, if possible. But I knew that any choice would have consequences. She would be hurt, our family would judge, and I would endure emotional wounds that no remedy could fix. Sitting alone in a dark room, looking at our wedding photo, our happy smiles, our shining eyes, I whispered to myself, I still love you, but I have to be honest with myself. We can't continue like this. I knew that love isn't just a feeling. It requires honesty and mutual respect. When trust is broken, love becomes a memory beautiful, but not enough to sustain a full relationship. After the truth about her infidelity came to light, the pressure wasn't just emotional for us. It pulled our families into a tense, complicated swirl. I had thought that my decision, even though painful, would be understood by her, and that we could work through everything calmly, especially for the sake of our child. I was wrong. Soon after, when I spoke honestly with her parents, my mother-in-law began attacking me with sharp words. How could you be so heartless? You're leaving our daughter just because her body changed after childbirth. You're not a decent man anymore. I was stunned, my mouth almost paralyzed. Noi wasn't leaving her because of her appearance. I had repeatedly explained that my decision came from broken trust, betrayal, and her infidelity, not looks. But my explanations felt useless, like water on a stone. Every call from her family became an emotional battle. My mother-in-law constantly texted my wife, calling her guilty, which crushed her spirit. I watched her cry through countless nights, looking at me with eyes full of pain and remorse. "Can you forgive me?" I held her close, but my heart ached too. I wanted to protect her from the family's pressure, but I knew I couldn't control everything. One evening, after the baby was asleep, we sat together on the sofa. Soft yellow light fell across her tired but still beautiful face. She sighed, voice trembling. "Mum has been calling me all day, blaming me. Can't you see? I can't take it anymore." I held her hand and said, "I know, but you have to understand, I'm not leaving you because of your body. I still love you, but the infidelity shattered my trust. I can't continue living in lies." She nodded, tears streaming down, as if the truth was too painful to accept. Family conflict wasn't just words, it came through actions. My mother-in-law showed up unannounced, checking on my wife while glaring at me. My father-in-law called, blaming me for not keeping the family happy. Even her siblings started judging and gossiping about the reasons for our divorce. I felt isolated between my love for my wife, my responsibility to our child, and the pressure from her family. She was completely overwhelmed. I saw confusion, pain, and guilt in every gesture. Once, when she sat on the living room floor, I knelt in front of her, holding her tightly. "I don't want to hurt you, but we have to face the truth. I love you, but we can't continue when trust is broken." She rested her head on my shoulder, sobbing. "Are you mad at me?" I want to fix things, but I don't know how." I stayed silent, feeling utterly helpless. In the following days, I tried to stay calm when dealing with her family. Every time her mother called, I answered evenly. "I understand your perspective, but please don't hurt her more. We're trying to handle this peacefully, for the sake of the child." Yet sometimes, their anger and judgment force me to leave the room, take deep breaths, just to avoid losing my temper. I knew that losing control would only make things worse. Meanwhile, my wife continued to bear tremendous pressure. The mental strain kept her awake at night, disrupted her appetite, and often left her sitting alone, staring into space. I worried about every little detail. Was she smiling, eating properly, talking to our child? Each time she cried, my chest tightened. I wanted to do something to make her feel safe, but the pressure from her family was beyond my control. I realized that it wasn't just our love being tested, the patience, compassion, and emotional endurance required of me were being worn down every day. I had to find a way for her to understand that I wasn't abandoning her, and that I wasn't the cruel man her mother believed me to be. I started planning serious conversations with both families, explaining, setting boundaries, and emphasizing that my goal was to protect my wife and child's mental well-being, not to create more conflict. One evening, after the baby was asleep, we sat down together. Soft light illuminating her tired face. "I know your parents are pressuring you, but you have to understand, I'm not leaving you because of your body. I still love you, but we can't go on living when trust is broken." She remained silent, eyes glistening, then rested her head on my shoulder. In that moment, I felt that our love was still there. But I also knew that love alone wasn't enough. It required honesty, patience, and the strength to withstand outside pressure. The conflict with her family lasted for weeks. I learned to control my emotions, patiently explain, and find ways to ease the burden on my wife. I realized that part of the pain she was enduring didn't come from me or her infidelity, but from the way her family handled the situation with pressure, judgment, and misunderstanding in quiet moments. We would sit together, talking about the past, what had happened, our child, and what we needed to do to move forward. Despite the heartbreak, I kept my promise to myself, not to let love become a burden, and not to let our child suffer from adult conflicts. And I realized something important. Love and forgiveness can exist, but family pressure, misunderstandings, and judgment can destroy a relationship faster than almost anything else. I had to learn to balance my love for my wife, my responsibility to our child, and the strength to face external pressure. The day of the final divorce arrived. There were no shouting matches, no explosive arguments, just a heavy silence, where I could feel every heartbeat pounding in my chest. We sat across from each other in the lawyer's office, hands trembling as we signed the papers that would define a new chapter. Life no longer as husband and wife, but still as parents to the same child. The soft yellow light of the office reflected off her vested, yet still carrying her unique beauty, and my heart felt both heavy and pierced with pain. Once the papers were signed, there was little to say. Just to look eyes filled with sadness, regret, but also relief. Relief that at last we had confronted the reality and could move forward in a different way. I saw the pain in her, but I also realized part of that pain was self-inflicted. Disappointment, guilt, and pressure from her family. After the divorce, everything felt unnervingly strange. The house, once full of laughter, was now silent, dotted with memories. Every object, every photo reminded me of happier times, of intimate moments, and of the mistakes we could never undo. I sat alone in the living room, looking at a family photo album, child smiling in her mother's arms, and felt an emptiness, mixed with grief and the responsibility I now had to carry. Memories of our wedding day, her laughter, and past promises now felt like faint, beautiful yet painful images. My ex-wife also experienced complex emotions after the divorce. At first, she cried often, hugging her pillow each night, staring blankly at the ceiling. The pain of betrayal, the shame from her affair, and family pressure sometimes made her want to give up. But day by day, she began to find herself again. She returned to exercise, took care of herself, joined classes, and slowly rebuilt her confidence. I smiled, seeing her recover, learning to love herself, and creating her own joy. Even though we were no longer married, I felt happy seeing her happy. In the first few weeks, post-divorce, I also had to confront a new kind of loneliness, solitude very different from when she was around. Without someone to share daily joys or troubles, I realized how much our connection had been a part of my life. Small habits like chatting about our day, texting to check in, or preparing dinner together were gone. I felt empty, but I also recognized that I needed to learn to live independently, while still taking responsibility for our child. I began to reorganize my life. I spent more time with my child, focused on work, and learned to slow down, to see things from a more mature perspective. I realized that divorce wasn't just an ending. It was also an opportunity for both of us to learn to love without possession, to build freedom and independence. My ex-wife also went through a process of self-rebuilding. She attended yoga classes, studied a new language, and reached out to friends who understood her beyond her appearance or past mistakes. She gradually grew more confident, smiled more, and began forming new relationships. But for me, the most important thing was that she learned to love herself first, to no longer feel insecure, miserable, or seek validation from others. However, the pain from broken trust lingered. Whenever I recalled her affair, my heart still ached. I learned not to let the past control the present, but those memories were a part of me, reminding me that love requires honesty to survive. I realized that if we didn't face the truth, trust could never be fully restored. One evening, after our child was asleep, I called her. "I just want to say, I know it's been really hard, but you're doing well." She smiled softly, her voice trembling. "Thank you." "You too." In that moment, I understood that even though we were no longer married, we could still support each other, still be companions in raising our child, and maintain peace within the family after the divorce. I learned that love is not about possession or control. It's about respect, forgiveness, and knowing when to let go. I loved my ex-wife in a different way, not interfering too much in her life, yet still caring, sharing important moments concerning our child. One day, taking our child to the park, I saw her laughing with our child, her eyes bright, without a trace of anxiety. I felt her recovery, the child's joy, and a rare peace within myself. At that moment, I knew that even though our marriage had ended, we could still create a happy family in a different form, not as husband and wife, but as companions for the sake of our child, responsibility, and enduring love. During this process, I also learned to forgive not just her, but myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to move forward without letting the past dominate. I realized that in love and marriage, trust is more important than anything else. When trust is broken, no amount of love can fully compensate. I began thinking about the future. Both of us needed time to heal, to build new lives, but love and responsibility toward our child would always connect us. I reminded myself that even if we were no longer a couple, we were still part of each other in responsibility, in memory, and in the love we shared for our child each day. I felt a little lighter as I realized that divorce was not a failure, but a step toward maturity. It allowed me to view love realistically, learn forgiveness, and build a peaceful, responsible, and loving life for my child. I learned that sometimes love doesn't mean holding on, it means knowing when to let go, so both can grow. During this time, I also realized that love doesn't only exist within marriage, can exist through care, respect, and companionship, even when two people are no longer spouses. Seeing her care for our child, hearing our child laugh happily beside her, I witnessed a new kind of love, deep, mature, and realistic. I understood that letting go doesn't mean failure. It means growth. It allows each person to reinvent themselves, learn to love themselves, and still uphold responsibilities to others, especially their child. And I knew that even though our marriage had ended, our relationship endured in a new form, more mature and lasting. After the first few weeks of post-divorce emotions, I began to feel something completely new. Loneliness, yet freedom, a loneliness that was painful but also allowed me to see myself clearly. I remember those first days vividly, returning to the old house, once filled with laughter, now just quiet. Every wall, every object reminded me of the past, happy memories mixed with pain that could never be undone. I would sit in the living room, looking out the window, watching my child play by their mother's side, and feel a mix of emptiness and responsibility rising within me. Day by day, I started to reorganize my life. Without my wife beside me to share joys, I had to learn to balance my emotions on my own. I went for morning walks, focused on work, and spent more time with my child. Every time I looked at them, I saw a pure kind of love, not tainted by mistakes or doubt. My child became my reason to keep moving forward through the loneliness. My wife was going through a similar journey, but in her own way. At first, she had sleepless nights, cried silently, and blamed herself for past mistakes. But over time, she found her balance again. She signed up for yoga classes, learned a new language, joined social activities, and slowly rediscovered joy. I could see the changes from a distance, her eyes brighter, her smile more frequent, and it seemed she had learned to love herself first. I realized that moving forward meant reshaping ourselves. It wasn't just about career or appearance, it was about how we viewed ourselves, how we faced our pain, and how we learned to love ourselves. I began keeping a journal, recording thoughts, feelings, failures, and successes. Writing helped me see myself clearly, understand what I needed, what I had lost, and what lessons I could carry from the past. Loneliness was unavoidable, but I learned to turn it into motivation. Instead of avoiding the pain, I faced it. I remembered every happy moment with my wife, every argument, and every mistake that led us to divorce. All of it was a valuable lesson. I realized that growing up isn't about never making mistakes, it's about learning from them and moving forward. Meanwhile, my wife had to learn to accept loneliness and loss. She began spending time outdoors with our child, walking in the park, reconnecting with old friends, and trying hobbies she had never dared to pursue. I saw her becoming freer, but also stronger. It made me happy, and yet a little sad happy because she found herself again. Sad because the love I thought would last a lifetime was now just a memory. One lesson I learned during this period was the value of independence and self-reliance. Before, my wife and I had relied too heavily on each other emotionally, leading to unnecessary conflicts. Now, I learned to stand on my own, care for myself, but still maintain a healthy relationship with my wife for the sake of our child. We began setting clear boundaries, making sure past tensions didn't affect the present, while still showing respect and care emotionally. I went through complex feelings, missing my wife, missing the memories, but also feeling relief that I was no longer bound by the doubts and stress that had existed in our marriage. I realized love isn't just a feeling, it's maturity, knowing when to let go and when to maintain distance. My child remained the center of every decision. Every time I saw them laughing and playing beside their mother, I felt a completely different kind of love, not possessive, not strategic, just care and protection. I learned to love my wife differently, not possessively, but with respect, partnership, and shared responsibility on quiet evenings. I often wrote in my journal, reflecting on the future. I realized that to move forward, I needed to forgive myself and others. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the past, it means learning to live with it without letting it control the present. I forgave my wife for her past mistakes and forgave myself for not being able to save everything. Forgiveness allowed me to live more freely, feel life more fully, and move forward with peace. My wife went through a similar process of forgiveness. She learned to let go of shame, gradually accepted that she wasn't perfect, and that no one is. She began opening up to friends, family, and the world in a more positive way. I could see the growth in her eyes, look no longer filled with fear or worry, but full of life and hope. One of the hardest parts was confronting the past of her infidelity. I had to learn to accept that the past was gone and couldn't be changed. I couldn't hold on to resentment or regret without drowning in pain. I realized that maturity is facing the truth, accepting it, and learning to move forward. This new life wasn't just about living alone. It was about rebuilding a relationship with my child and my ex-wife in a more mature way. I started routines like taking my child to school, joining them in extracurricular activities, and supporting my wife in important decisions about our child. We were no longer a married couple, but we were still a family in a different way, peaceful, mature, and lasting. Through this process, I realized love isn't only about romantic relationships. It's about how we care for, respect, and accompany one another. Watching my wife care for our child, hearing our child laugh happily with her, I saw a new kind of love, deep, mature, and practical. That's what gave me peace, even though the marriage had ended. Finally, I learned that living independently without loneliness, loving without possession, and growing up in how we face life were the most valuable lessons from this divorce. It taught me to live realistically, love myself and those around me maturely, and prepare myself for whatever challenges lie ahead. After a few months of adjusting to my new life, I began to realize that life after divorce wasn't an endless void. It was an opportunity to heal, to rediscover joy, and to find happiness in my own way. At first, it was hard. Every morning I woke up feeling the absence of someone to share my day with, a hand to hold. Gradually, though, I learned to face loneliness without fear, to comfort myself, and to find small joys in everyday life. A key part of my recovery was dedicating time to myself. I started exercising regularly, taking walks in the park, attending personal development and psychology classes, and especially keeping a journal. Every time I wrote, I poured out my emotions from pain and regret to the rare moments of happiness, and felt a sense of relief. Reflecting on everything helped me understand that suffering is inevitable, but I have the right to choose how to confront it. My ex-wife went through a similar emotional recovery process in her own way. She started engaging in social activities, meeting new friends, and learning to open her heart without fear of being hurt. I could see the change in her eyes, from deep sadness to glimpses of joy, gradually transforming into confidence and relief. It gave me comfort knowing that, even though we were no longer married, she was reclaiming her own happiness. During this process, I learned lessons about forgiveness and acceptance. Forgiveness isn't only for others, it's also for yourself. I forgave my ex-wife for her past mistakes and forgave myself for the choices I hesitated to make. Forgiveness allowed me to move forward without being trapped by regrets or guilt. This sense of relief opened my heart to life and new relationships. Another crucial step in recovery was reconnecting with personal joy. Before, many of my pleasures were tied to my wife. Movie nights, short trips, shared meals. Now, I learned to find happiness in my own pursuits, reading, solo travel, exploring hobbies I had neglected. Every small experience reminded me that happiness doesn't have to depend on someone else, can come from within, emotionally. I also learned to open my heart slowly and thoughtfully. I realized that seeking a new relationship wasn't about filling a void, but about sharing joy and sorrow in a more mature way. I learned to observe, feel, and evaluate relationships rationally, without letting negative emotions take control. My child remained at the center of every decision I made. Playing, studying, and exploring the world together. I found a pure happiness in watching my child laugh and learn a happiness untouched by past mistakes or pain. I realized that the love I feel for my child is complete, pure, and a strong motivator for my personal growth. My ex-wife also participated in this process. She spent time with our child, engaged in outdoor activities, and worked with me on major decisions concerning our child's life. We learned to cooperate without overstepping into each other's personal lives, a mature dynamic that we had never truly understood before. One day, while taking our child to the park, I witnessed a beautiful moment. Our child laughing, my ex-wife laughing along, and me watching from a distance, feeling completely at peace. I realized that happiness doesn't always come from a marital relationship. It can come from enjoying each moment and appreciating the life you have. Throughout this journey, I understood that mature love isn't just about feelings, it's also about responsibility, respect, and freedom. Loving doesn't mean possessing, and happiness doesn't have to come from a single person. I learned to love without control, to care without suffocating, and to open my heart without fear. One of the toughest challenges was confronting the past infidelity. Each memory still stung, but I learned to see it as a lesson rather than a failure. I realized that holding on to pain would prevent me from moving forward. Forgiveness, learning, and growth became the only path to live peacefully with my ex-wife. Gradually, I noticed changes in myself. I became more patient, gentler with myself and others. I learned to listen, to avoid rushing to judgment, and to understand that healing takes time. I balanced responsibilities toward my child, my career, and my personal needs. Creating a more harmonious life, my ex-wife changed in similar ways. She became strong, confident, and learned to love herself. She set boundaries, said no when necessary, and learned to enjoy life without guilt. I could see the joy and hope in her eyes, a sign that she had found herself after months of struggle. One evening, while watching a movie with our child, I realized that family doesn't require marriage to be whole. It's about love, care, and companionship. I felt peaceful, happy, and understood that we had found a new way to live, mature, respectful, and still a family, even without being husband and wife. I learned that happiness is a choice. It comes from how we face life, from how we love ourselves and those around us. I am no longer afraid of being alone, no longer haunted by the past, and I understand that love and happiness can exist in many forms, mature, grounded, and real. This new life allowed me to see a better version of myself. I learned to love without possessing, forgive without forgetting, and cherish every moment with my child and ex-wife in a completely new way. I realized that true happiness isn't about avoiding hardships, it's about how we overcome them and what we learn along the way. After many months living in the quiet space following the divorce, I realized it was time to open myself to new relationships, not to fill a void, but to rediscover myself, test my emotional limits, and learn to love in a more mature way. I used to think happiness could only come from my marriage, but now I've learned that love and joy can take many forms, as long as we're mature enough to recognize their true value. That my ex-wife went through a similar journey. She started opening up to new friends, joining social clubs, and trying hobbies she had never dared before. Every time I saw her laugh, I felt the freedom and genuine happiness. She had found a joy no longer tied to the past or past mistakes. Though we were no longer married, we both understood that we must be the source of our own happiness before looking for it in someone else. For me, opening my heart didn't mean rushing into a new relationship. I began by rebuilding myself, focusing on hobbies, my career, and social connections I had neglected. I signed up for a photography course, attended personal development workshops, and gradually expanded my network. Each new experience helped me uncover parts of myself I had forgotten, discover what I truly enjoyed, and learn how to live fully in the moment. Then, by chance, I met a woman with a kind smile and warm eyes. Someone who sparked a different kind of connection. Without rushing or feeling pressured, we started talking, sharing interests and perspectives on life, and gradually exploring deeper emotions. I realized that a new relationship isn't about erasing the past, but about exploring my capacity to love again. My ex-wife also began seeking happiness in her own way. She engaged in social activities, traveled with friends, and gradually opened herself to potential new connections. I saw her smile more, grow more confident, and most importantly learn to put herself first despite past pain and disappointment. That gave me peace, knowing our child had a happy, strong role model. During this process, I learned that self-love is a prerequisite for loving others. In the past, I relied too much on my ex-wife for emotional fulfillment, which caused conflict and hurt. Now, I create my own joy, comfort myself, and appreciate my own worth before extending that love outward. Every day, I dedicate time to myself, reading, taking photos, or simply reflecting quietly on life. One of the most important lessons I learned was not to compare past and present, not to let painful memories distort my view of a new relationship. I realized each relationship has its own value and cannot be judged against the past. This perspective allowed me to open up, embrace emotions naturally, and learn to love without fear or doubt. Our child remained at the center of every decision. I carefully considered opening myself to someone new, ensuring that nothing would hurt our child. I wanted them to understand that love and happiness aren't only about being with one person, but about how we treat and care for the people around us. I wanted them to see that love can take many forms, as long as it comes with respect and responsibility. My ex-wife also observed our child and me, learning to balance enjoying her own life with ensuring stability for our child. We began establishing new guidelines, discussing important decisions together, sharing parenting responsibilities, and maintaining a mature, respectful relationship. Gradually, we both realized that family doesn't have to mean being married, means love, care, and partnership for the sake of our child. I also realized that opening up to someone new doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means accepting it, learning from it, and moving forward. I no longer carry shame or regret into a new relationship. Instead, I bring maturity, confidence, and the ability to love wisely. As I explored new connections, I learned to listen, feel, and cherish each moment. Free from the stress of my former marriage, without doubt or pressure, I could enjoy closeness, sharing, and joy naturally. Each conversation, laugh, or small shared hobby brought genuine happiness, a joy born from sincere connection, not personal gain. My ex-wife experienced similar moments. She learned to open her heart gradually, taking care not to rush, and balanced personal enjoyment with responsibility for our child. She found new happiness through self-care, challenging herself, and cultivating meaningful social relationships. This gave her confidence, a brighter smile, and most importantly understanding that true happiness begins with loving oneself. One evening, our child, my ex-wife, and I attended a small cultural event in the city. Watching my child play and laugh, seeing her smile alongside them, I felt an extraordinary moment of peace. I realized that love and happiness aren't tied solely to marriage. They're about facing life, appreciating those around us, and savoring each moment. Redefining myself wasn't just about opening to others, it was about recognizing my own value, learning to accept and love myself. I focused on my career, personal hobbies, and self-development. I tried new things, learning music, participating in community activities, exploring new places. Each experience revealed new potential and opportunities. Through this journey, I also learned to separate emotions from past pain. Every relationship has its own worth, and past hurt should not overshadow present joy. I learned to savor every moment, enjoy every smile, conversation, and small experience. Life had started to settle months after the divorce, and I realized something important. Peace doesn't just come from the absence of conflict. It comes from accepting the past and respecting the present. I began looking at my relationship with my ex-wife more calmly, without the pain or frustration that used to cloud my mind, but with understanding and appreciation for what we once had. Our relationship now was completely different. There was no possessiveness, no blame, just partnership for our child, and empathy and understanding for each other. I realized that happiness doesn't come from trying to rewind the past or holding on to what's gone. It comes from accepting ourselves and each other. My ex-wife had also changed in positive ways. She was no longer burdened by family pressure or self-doubt. She learned to love herself, take care of her mental and physical health, and slowly build her own life. Seeing her happy, free, and able to appreciate her relationship with our child without being weighed down by the past gave me peace. One day, while taking our child for a walk in the park, we shared small conversations about work, hobbies, and new experiences. There was no tension or disagreement, just calm, ease, and serenity. I realized that true peace isn't about feeling nothing. It's about managing emotions without letting them control your decisions and actions. During this time, I also opened myself to new relationships, but with more clarity and maturity. I learned to love without possessiveness, care without control, and balance personal joy with responsibility for our child. Every new relationship was natural, genuine, and meaningful. Free from pressure, my ex-wife also embarked on a similar journey. She made new friends, challenged herself socially, and gradually opened her heart to potential romantic opportunities. I could see her confidence and happiness grow, and it reminded me that true happiness isn't about possessing someone. It's about seeing those you once loved thrive. We also learned to co-parent effectively without pressure or conflict. Every decision about our child, from school to extracurricular activities, even small daily choices, was discussed carefully. I realized that responsibility doesn't disappear when love ends, and maintaining a good relationship with my ex is essential to creating a stable environment for our child. A major step in finding peace was accepting the past. I no longer held on to resentment or pain from the affair, but saw it as a part of life, a lesson in growth. Forgiveness wasn't just for her, it was for me too, so the past wouldn't hold me back. My ex-wife went through a similar process. She forgave herself for past mistakes, let go of guilt, and found relief, confidence, and the ability to enjoy the present without being haunted by the past. Through all this, I also discovered the value of sharing joy and sorrow with others. I reconnected with old friends, participated in social activities, and expanded my network. Each experience taught me empathy, sharing, and the ability to find joy in simple things. Our child remained at the center of every decision. I always prioritized their needs and happiness, ensuring that any changes in my life or my ex-wife's life did not disrupt their emotional stability. Our child was the greatest motivation for us to maintain a peaceful relationship and create a happy, safe environment. One afternoon, while the three of us sat on the grass in the park, watching our child run and play while my ex-wife read a book, I felt an uncommon sense of peace. No pressure, no pain, just companionship, respect, and love. It was a mature happiness I had never known before. I also realized that new happiness isn't just about romantic love. It's about self-love, love for our child, and love for life's experiences. I learned to savor each moment, cherish small joys, and not let pressure or the past dictate my decisions. My ex-wife, even though she was no longer my wife, learned to create her own happiness. She joined courses, traveled with friends, and gradually opened up to new connections. Seeing her confident, radiant, and happy reassured me she was rebuilding her life positively. Another key lesson was learning to open our hearts without fear of being hurt. Both of us understood that love doesn't mean possession, and happiness doesn't come from controlling others. We learned to love, care, and participate in our child's life and our surroundings without pressure, burden, or harshness toward ourselves. Gradually, our old relationship became light and peaceful. No tension, no arguments, just respect, empathy, and understanding. We learned to communicate when necessary, give space when needed, and always prioritize our child's best interests. This peace created a stable, happy environment for everyone. Through this process, I also learned a vital lesson. True happiness isn't about expecting perfection in others. It's about improving yourself and enjoying life's simple pleasures. I learned to slow down, appreciate each moment, and understand that sometimes the greatest joy comes from small, ordinary things. Finally, I realized that a family doesn't have to be a married couple to be complete. Family is companionship, love, and responsibility. Happiness can take many forms: romantic love, parental love, friendship, and sex. Knowing how to enjoy all of these is the key to living fully. After nearly a year living in the post-divorce world, I realized that peace isn't about silence or the absence of conflict. It's about balance between the past, present, and future. Every step I took taught me something new about maturity, about forgiveness, and about how to love without possessing. I went through months of loneliness and pain, but those very months taught me how to love myself and see life with deeper understanding. Daily life now feels simple but full of meaning. Each morning, I take time for myself, exercising, reading, writing in my journal, and preparing breakfast for my child. There's no longer the pressure or tension I once felt. Only calm, freedom, and peace. I've learned to appreciate the little moments. My child's laughter, sunlight streaming through the window, and simple but heartfelt conversations. My ex-wife is also finding her own peace. She takes care of herself, participates in social activities, and learns to love without self-imposed pressure. We maintain a mature relationship, cooperating and caring for our child, but without the previous conflicts or tension. This relationship has become one of companionship and mutual respect, a new kind of family. We're no longer married, but love and responsibility remain. A crucial part of finding this peace was complete forgiveness. I forgave my ex-wife for past mistakes, forgave myself for the choices I hesitated on, and forgave the pain I had endured. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about accepting reality and not letting the past control the future. This forgiveness allowed me to open my heart more fully to life, to my child, and to new relationships. Emotionally, I've learned how to manage pain, nurture happiness, and maintain inner balance. In the past, I let emotions drive my actions, leading to conflict and suffering. Now, I observe my emotions objectively, understanding their causes and effects, and choose positive ways to respond. Every day, I practice patience, empathy, and gratitude, qualities that bring real peace. My child remains at the center of every decision. I ensure that every change in our lives provides a stable and happy environment. Each smile, step, and word reminds me that true love is about unconditional care and sacrifice. Watching my child grow, learn, and explore the world shows me that happiness isn't about control or possession. It's about accompanying and supporting. That my ex-wife has learned this, too. She balances enjoying her own life with the responsibility of raising our child. We discuss important decisions together, share childcare duties, and maintain a mature, peaceful relationship. This cooperation creates a happy, stable, and loving environment for our child. One evening, the three of us sat in the park watching the sunset. I felt a complete peace I had never known before. The soft golden light touched my child's face, reflecting joy and happiness in my ex-wife's eyes. Standing there, I felt a deep sense of relief, realizing that life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful if we know how to appreciate it. During this journey, I also learned how to open my heart to new love without rushing. I no longer seek a relationship to fill a void. Instead, I seek connection, joy, empathy, and a chance to explore love in a mature way. Each conversation, laugh, or shared activity brings genuine happiness, happiness born from sincere, non-possessive connection. My ex-wife is doing the same in her own way. She engages in social activities, challenges herself, and gradually opens up to potential new relationships. I see her radiant, confident, and happy, an image that reassures me because I know she is living, fully and positively reinventing herself. One key lesson I've learned is that happiness isn't just found in others, it comes from within and through life experiences. I enjoy simple pleasures, reading, walking in the city, photography, savoring good meals, and conversations with my child. Inner peace and true happiness come from living fully in the moment and loving yourself and those around you. Throughout this process, I've realized that family doesn't have to be defined by being married. It's about companionship, love, and responsibility. My ex-wife and I remain a family in a different way, no longer spouses, but still raising our child together, sharing responsibilities, and cherishing happy moments. One night, after our child was asleep, I sat down and reflecting on the journey from divorce until now. I saw how much I've grown, calmer, stronger, and more resilient. I've learned to love without possessing, to forgive without forgetting, and to live fully in each moment. Life isn't always perfect, but if we know how to appreciate it and love, it becomes beautiful and meaningful. Finally, I understand that ultimate peace isn't the absence of challenges, it's facing them with courage and maturity. I've learned so much about love, forgiveness, responsibility, and how to live a happy life. I look into my child's eyes, see my ex-wife's radiant smile, and feel that life is still full of color, full of love, and full of opportunities for happiness. I am no longer afraid of loneliness. no longer haunted by the past, and no longer worried about the future. Peace has arrived from the heart, from the soul, and from small but meaningful actions in everyday life. I know that happiness and peace are choices, and we can find them anytime if we learn to appreciate and love.